Hello and welcome to another episode of The Brothers Discuss. I am Alex.
And I am Chris.
All right, Chris. So I think we've both watched a lot in the past month, so we've got a bunch of things to talk about. So should we jump into the first one, which I thought was a very, very good movie?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right, so first up is The Wild Robot. Did you see this?
I haven't seen it yet.
Uh, but okay, so the movie is really, really good. When this was released, it got such a wildly positive reaction, and I was really happy that I saw it because I thought it was great. And the cast is really stacked with a lot of notable people. I mean, like, I didn't even realize I was listening to Mark Hamill for a decent portion of the movie, but yeah. So when you see a cast like that, you kind of think, oh, this is like they have a really stacked up cast because have they stacked this up because it's kind of one of those movies where they feel like they have to get star power. I mean, but then you realize that's just how DreamWorks cast their films. But
Hmm.
everyone in it is really, really good, and Lupita Nyong'o is particularly really good. But in terms of it just being a very like likable story, I've seen a lot of people compare it to Wall-E and things like that. But to me, I just thought even though it's not necessarily a new topic for a film to tackle, I thought it did it really, really well in a really interesting way with it being a machine essentially learning to love and that being incorrect. And heartfelt is the main phrase I've used to describe this. Like really heartfelt, really sweet film. I think the only negative I would say is that it is a subject matter that's dealt with a bunch of times. That's kind of the most like things I've seen. Like on Letterboxd, I thought that people have talked about it in a negative way of like it's not really a new story, but it's a well-told version of that. So that's what I'm gathering is a lot of people's kind of gripe with it is that like, okay, I've seen this story before, so I get that, but that doesn't mean you can't take a possibly overdone subject matter and do it really well. And especially when this is a family movie, a lot of kids will see it. It's a nice lesson to teach kids, I think. So that's a positive. All right. So we got a bit of news. Speaking of we'll stick to the realm of animation for a little while. We got the announcement from James Gunn that they are going to be making a DC animated film called Dynamic Duo, which is going to be a story focused on Dick Grayson and Jason Todd, and it'll be a wide variety of like animation styles, like a mixture of like puppetry and CGI stuff like that. Chris, what do you think of this?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious like how the different styles are going to play into this, but just as a concept of Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, like that's an interesting matchup that I haven't really thought of like doing a movie on. So like I'm pretty sold on that alone, but the different styles does sound interesting and I'm curious how they'll, play it with that.
Yeah. And notably, Matt Reeves is attached to this project in some capacity. I don't think this means that it's going to be connected to his Batman universe in any way. It's just, he's lending his talent to the project, whether it's like producing, what have you. I don't really know what to think about this yet because I don't want to be one of those people that just hates that it's just an announcement. Like, give me something else or whatever. Like, I don't know. I think
Right.
it's neat that it's something that they are planning on making. Like, they also announced a lot of other stuff that they haven't really started, but the fact that this is something that they're announcing, like it's coming pretty soon-ish, like that's good news. So yeah, cool.
Hmm.
All right, Chris, you saw a movie. Would you like to talk
Yes.
about it?
Which one we're talking about? Megalopolis.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So, Francis Ford Coppola, he made another movie for the first time in like 10 or so years. So, this one's pretty weird. It's very weird, and I feel like that alone's gonna be very off-putting for people. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend this is a masterpiece. I enjoyed parts of it, but it's very strange, and I feel like a lot of people won't be able to get over just like how absurd like the presentation and execution of this movie is.
I've seen this
Um,
movie heavily compared to Attack of the Clones. Can you speak to the validity of those claims?
I think those claims are like really focusing on some of the visuals in the movie because like some of the specifically like visual effects, like they look fake and like obviously fake. but I think like that kind of has a purpose in this movie, whereas Attack of the Clones, like that was just George Lucas being lazy. Um, so like I think some of the ideas, especially in the second half of the movie, it gets more and more interesting. But I initially was like somewhat positive, like walking out on this movie because I was okay with like how ridiculous it got, and I was kind of enjoying it because of that. And I know that's not going to be for everyone, but like I had fun with it. So go see it, I guess. That's
Go
my
back
take.
to the club.
Go back to the club.
I've seen that clip at least, and I was like
Yeah, that's the
fascinating.
highlight of the movie, I'd say.
Nice. All right. Well, I watched a movie called Wolves. There's no V, it's an F. This is a movie directed by John Watts, who directed the MCU Spider-Man stuff. He also directed Cop Car. So this is his first non-Spider-Man thing for a while. This is an Apple movie. It was meant to get a cinema release and then just didn't. They put it on Apple TV Plus, which is only odd considering who's in it, which is George Clooney and Brad Pitt. And it's not that they shouldn't just be in a film, but straight to streaming. But it's weird that you took this movie with these two really big stars, and you could try and make some money with it, but they didn't even try. Ah well,
That's what's
hey,
interesting. I was planning on seeing this movie because I saw it was going to get like a limited theatrical release, and then yeah, I saw it was like it never happened.
no, yeah. But anyway, yeah, I didn't have a lot of excitement or anything going into this. It's just two really big actors and thought it'd be a fun spy movie. You've seen the trailer that Amy Ryan, Holly in The Office, she calls the special number on her phone because someone has died in her hotel room, and it's George Clooney, and he's all cool, and he's like, I'm the only one that can handle this and all that. And then suddenly someone else shows up, and it's Brad Pitt. And Amy Ryan didn't call Brad Pitt, but there's a little camera in her hotel room, and so they have to handle the situation together. So it seems like, kind of like a buddy cop movie, buddy spy movie kind of movie, but they're technically both criminals. And it's not bad. I know it's not gotten overwhelmingly great reviews, but I thought it was a fun movie to watch. It was kind of one of those, I think we say this a lot, but we used to get a lot of like movies like this, and now it feels like a little more special when we get a good one of these. So that is what I really liked about it. John Watts. I have seen Cop Car, but we've talked a little bit in the past. Like there's that scene that everyone likes in Homecoming where it's the lights changing on Michael Keaton's face and how good that scene looks, and then the rest of it looks like a regular MCU movie. Then the one scene visually that I think is really well shot in No Way Home is when Goblin reveals that he's actually been the Goblin the whole time. Norman's on sabbatical. Like that scene is really well shot, and like the way they shoot light through the blinds and everything, and that then a lot of the movie also just looks like an MCU movie. So I'm kind of curious about John Watts as a filmmaker. Like, what do his movies look like when he doesn't have to make something look like something else that already exists? And what I noticed in this, and it's funny because it stars Brad Pitt, is that he and his cinematographer, I suppose, try to do a very David Fincher-esque looking movie. Like the extreme close-ups on items and things like that, like the way the camera moves. I'm like, okay, this sort of feels like Seven or like any of those movies, but it's not quite right. And it's like a dark comedy, which I know a lot of Fincher stuff has like a dark humor element to it, but this was like a comedy. And yeah, so that was, I don't know if I liked that or not. I thought it was weird, but anyway, a fun movie. It's not like an out of the world recommendation, but it was fun. And I'll say this, I generally don't have Apple TV Plus. It's not that they don't make good movies or shows, because I believe they do. Besides Ted Lasso, I haven't really watched any of their shows. I know Severance is really popular, and they've got a lot of other popular stuff, but yeah, they make a lot of content, and oftentimes the stuff they make is said to be quite good. It's just, it kind of falls under the radar a little bit, which is funny when it's Apple, but there you go. I mean, they've won an Oscar for Best Picture. Like, they're doing okay.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that I watched, I'll jump through this kind of quickly. another film that was getting a lot of recommendations and a highly rated film online was Rebel Ridge on Netflix. So I'll cut to the chase. I didn't love it the way a lot of other people have. I thought it was fine. I appreciate the performances a lot. I appreciate the filmmaking. I know it's directed by Jeremy Saulnier, who has made a lot of stuff. Green Room is very popular, Blue Ruin, but this kind of seemed to be one that was getting a lot of people's attention. And the lead performance, Aaron Pierre's performance, is really, really good. And Don Johnson's in it, and Anna Sophia Robb, David Denman. I just thought it was fine. I don't know. I was a little confused at times, and it just didn't grab me the way it has for others, but it's really grabbed a lot of people. Like, its average rating for it is decently high. So I just thought that was odd. I kind of went into this going, you know what? I should watch this because it seems to be quite popular and well-liked. And then I finished it, and I was like, oh, that was fine. But yeah, I do like the tone of his other movies, though, so I don't know. Like, this one just didn't grab me as much. Chris, what else have you watched recently?
So I checked out Transformers 1. We got another Transformers movie, and this time it's back to roots, baby.
And this is going to be the last Transformers movie that ever gets released in theaters.
Hey, maybe, but that's okay because this one was actually really good. So
Nice.
yeah, so I didn't really have much expectations going into this movie. I wasn't even really that excited because the trailers I thought looked just weird. But it was getting a lot of good reviews, so I was like, I'll check it out. And yeah, to my surprise, it was actually pretty good. I've heard a lot of people online, and I don't know if this is just Transformers fans saying this kind of stuff, but a lot of comparisons to Across the Spider-Verse or those type of animated movies. I don't think it's quite up to there. But it is really good, and Chris Hemsworth is great as a younger, kind of almost entirely different character, and he transforms into Optimus Prime at the end of the movie. And but the biggest takeaway for me was definitely Brian Tyree Henry as Megatron. He was absolutely great in this movie. His motivations are really well set up and everything, and you kind of know where the movie's going to go. When you're doing a Transformers origin story, where characters going to end up in the film. But I think what the smart thing this does is it makes the audience kind of dread, that happening since it's not really that surprising. So it was a really good ending, and it's kind of shocking how much it goes for it at the end in terms of just some of the violence in it. But I thought it paid off really well, and it's good to actually have a good Transformers movie outside of Bumblebee. It's been a while, so yeah, I definitely recommend Transformers 1.
I mean, look, I didn't see it, so I'm part of the problem, I suppose. It's funny that it was out in theaters. I kind of forgot that it was, to be honest. But we knew for a long time that Transformers was going to meet its demise on the big screen at some point.
Mm-hmm.
There's just been way too many things, so it's a shame that this didn't catch on, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm kind of curious, if that'll stick. I wonder if word of mouth will actually help this movie, because I think Bumblebee was kind of in the same situation. It didn't have a great opening weekend, but then it just took off after that because people really enjoyed it. So I don't know.
Who knows? All right, Chris, it's main event time.
Main event time.
It is. We're of course talking about Joker 2. Joker fighting with my shadow or something like that. I like the cartoon in the beginning. That was fun.
Yeah.
So why don't you start this one off, Chris? Give us your snapshot impression of the movie.
Okay. Well, my initial impression was very mixed, and that seems to be kind of the big trend going on with this movie, unless you're anti-musical, which a lot of people are, and they don't want to admit it, and then they act shocked when they watch a musical, and then they bash it to absurdity, which is kind of what happened with this movie. But I was pretty mixed because I felt like a lot of progression of the ending was pretty abrupt. I know you're gonna say like the movie lost you. It didn't necessarily lose me, but like it left me kind of confused. And I liked a lot of the movie for the most part, but like that was definitely the biggest hurdle. So I went to go rewatch it, and I actually loved the movie so much more a second time. And I would go as far as to say I think I like it more than the first one.
Wow.
But there's a lot to talk about with that, so I don't really know exactly where to start with that. But um, yeah, that's kind of my takeaway from it.
So I think one of the frustrating things for me is that there's a lot of things in the movie that really work for me. I mean, we talked about this ages ago, the idea of this being a musical and how that was kind of an odd idea. But if you
Mhm.
want to make something totally unique and different, it's a very interesting idea. And therefore, having Lady Gaga playing Harley Quinn, it was an interesting choice for musical reasons. Like, and I
Yeah.
will say, she's really good in this. Like when she's singing the Joker early in the film, or to Arthur, I suppose. It's in one of the trailers, and she's just kind of softly singing, and she sounds like someone who's not a professional singer that can just kind of mildly hold a tune. Like,
Yeah.
and I thought that was yes. My point is that I liked how she did that. Like, and then later she's performing a lot more like Lady Gaga. Like, I just thought that was just very talented on her part. Okay, we might as well talk about the musical aspect now.
Okay.
This is the problem, I think. I really liked the sequence. I think the song is called "The Joker" that he
Yeah.
sings in the courtroom where he bashes in the head of the judge and shoots Harvey Dent and all that stuff and shoots himself. Like, I think it's my favorite part of the movie. I thought that was a really well put together sequence. And I think if we had maybe three musical numbers like that, where they're totally in their own minds, I guess you want to say, like they're fantasy sequences, they're a lot more like musicals. I think that would work a lot more than what they did, which
See,
was
I kind of got I thought we did kind of have that because you have the sequence where it's like the Joker and Harley show, and I don't
mhm,
know how soon you want to get into spoilers,
sure,
but
yeah. But but what I'm saying is there's a point where the first of the trials is happening, and
Mhm.
Lee, I guess her name was, the Harleen Quinzel. Like, she's standing there outside smoking, and she's just kind of softly singing to herself. And there was kind of a point where I was like, why? Why is this happening? Like, this is not contributing to the movie at all. And there are sequences in the trailer that didn't make it into the movie where they're both dancing down the stairs of the courthouse that didn't make it in the movie. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's these random sequences where they're just singing to each other, or like a fantasy sequence where Joker is singing to all the people in prison, and then you realize it wasn't actually happening. So it didn't
Yeah.
really, like, what was the point of that? Like, I think if they just saved the musical numbers to like three of them, and then when Lee starts singing, mild spoilers, she starts singing towards the end of the movie, and Joker has to tell her to stop singing, and he like shushes her, like, I want to, like, he says like please stop singing. Like it's funny because I think that's a lot of people's reaction to that scene. Like, maybe Warner Brothers were expecting that, so they think that's funny, but it's actually a sad, tragic moment. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know, like the singing, like, I thought it was a really interesting idea that they didn't quite properly utilize to their advantage.
Okay. So I'm actually gonna defend this because
Ooh.
this is part of like what I picked up on the rewatch. So um should we just get into spoilers now? Because I don't know like if I can contain myself with some of this stuff. So
Sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll say, non-spoiler, TLDR, I'm meh on it. You're more positive on it, I guess. So
Mhm.
let's get into this.
Okay, so the musical sequences in this movie, they kind of like replace the imaginary sequences from the first movie. And I think stylistically that's pretty smart because you can't really fool your audience a second time when you establish like he's got all those things going on. But I think like what the the purpose of it is, and this is my interpretation, but it's set up in the animated intro. It's like me and my shadow. And basically the musical sequences, it's like that's the Joker part of Arthur. That's his Joker persona. Kind of like slowly but surely, branching out of Arthur. And the thing about those sequences is that like it takes a while to get to the first like real one where he's like singing in the prison. It's after he meets Lee, and it's kind of implied that that's kind of where he stops taking his medications. And so it's not like a really grand musical sequence, but at that point it's, you're kind of like, oh, what's happening? And then as the movie goes on, the sequences get a little bit more free and stylish and loose. And free and more frequent too, which is also a pretty big thing. And as that keeps happening, it's kind of meant to kind of say like where the Joker character is at that point. Like in the Joker and Harley show, that's when Harley shoots him because he's kind of having conflicted feelings of like who Lee actually is and like what she's actually like trying to accomplish with Arthur or Joker. And you get to the point in the courtroom sequence, which I also love that one a lot, where he's like, the Joker is me. He's got that whole song. And it's like kind of abrupt. I've heard a lot of people complain about this, is that like that song just kind of happens in the middle of a testimony. And but it kind of serves a purpose because like right after that, he fires his lawyer. He shows up the next day in like the full Joker attire and the makeup and the playful nature. And that's kind of like when he goes full Joker, and everyone's kind of backing that. And so like what I think is like really interesting about this movie is that like it's a very bold direction, but it's basically like questioning like who you really want Arthur to be. It's not really subtle. Like Todd Phillips is, going right to the audience and saying, hey, a lot of you didn't really get the first movie. You're focusing on just a Joker origin movie. I'm trying to talk about like mental health issues and classism. And this was, I don't know if Todd Phillips, I'm sure he didn't really want to make a second one. This is definitely a studio thing. You're the first R-rated movie to make over $1 billion. So, make another one. But I'm sure like maybe initially didn't want to make it, but I didn't get like Love and Thunder vibes of like him just kind of throwing away this movie. I felt like if he was going to do this, he was going to, just go straight to the audience and say, hey, you guys were wrong about the first one. Here's what it's actually about. And, we're just going to make Arthur, and we're kind of going to like ditch this whole Joker thing and like actually, sympathize with a character like Arthur, which is really tragic. And that's a bold choice that not a lot of people are going to appreciate, but I really do. So I feel like, yeah, long story short, but yeah, that's the musical sequences worked a lot better for me. And then when you get to the end point and he's like, stop singing, I'm done singing. That's because like at that point, he's done with Joker. Joker's only caused him pain and suffering. His one work friend is now scared to death of him, and like he used to be like the one thing that was like actually good in his life. He gets assaulted in prison. His other prisoner friend gets murdered, and it's all because he picked up this persona, and everyone else like they also have like their shadows or darker halves, and that comes out as he becomes more and more Joker. So I don't know. I really liked all that stuff.
Well, where I want to start with that is, I'll get to this later, but the Joker being a different personality, I don't buy that.
Okay.
I did not think that was the case in the first movie. To me, the point of the first movie is that it's not so much like a split personality or anything like that. To me, it was just like a guy that just finally cracked because of society. Mm-hmm. What I'll start with by saying is, I think a movie about a Batman villain that's set in Arkham and in a courthouse, I really love that as an idea for a movie. I just want to get that out of the gate. There's moments in this where you're just told things have happened. Like there are points in the movie where like Harley tells like I'm calling her Harley. Lee tells Arthur to stop taking his medicine, and he goes, I already stopped, or something like that. And it's like, you have? And the other big point is Lee says that she's pregnant. And like, I'm hopping around this movie. Like Lee says that she's pregnant, and it's like, she says it in such a, she almost says it like aggressively, the Joker. Like where at the time I was like, why did you say it like that? Like that should be like a great big happy thing, shouldn't it? But then at the end, we get a clue where, Joker is dying. We'll talk about that later. But
Okay.
we get a glimpse back to that Sonny and Cher sequence where he starts singing to Harley that he'll find their child or something like that. And it's like, well, that's all well and good, but you're dead. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know. Like, they kind of just give you information at times, and it's like, why was it delivered to me like that? Like, why shouldn't Lee be super happy? Just weird things like that feel like, and a lot of people are hating on Todd Phillips for this, but it feels like they're written by someone who's not necessarily a super great writer in terms of structure and dishing out information.
Sure. And I mean, I kind of had those same gripes with the first movie. It's like a lot of things just kind of happen. And it's actually kind of like the same thing where it's like in the first movie, he's just like, oh, I stopped taking my medication. The difference, though, is that like that was at the third act of that movie. This was very early on in this movie. So I'm a little bit more okay with it in here. What you were saying, like the sequence with Harley or Lee, where she's like, I'm pregnant. And um, that like I get what you mean, like it was kind of like unceremonious, but the context of that scene is like he's questioning like the legitimacy of Lee, um we don't know if she's actually telling the truth. Like she could be lying about that. You never find out if she's actually pregnant, but I think like the point of that was like she's got a lot of manipulation going on with Arthur throughout the whole movie, and that was just like one of the cases where she's like, stop thinking about like the bad side of me, like just she's trying to bring out Arthur's Joker side. And I get what you mean. It's like I don't think it's a split personality either. I think the thing with the first movie is that it's just a kind of a big cosmic fluke that it happened to be Arthur. Like he was never special, and it literally could have been anyone. Like it's a whole class thing. It's not just Arthur. And he says, like in the movie, he's not like a political person or anything. He's not doing this for, any sort of like major reason other than like he sees a pretty big class issue and he kind of just wants answers to it. There was like a lot of transformation going on with Arthur in the first movie, whereas like with this movie, he kind of starts off as like pathetic Arthur again, but like I think that's kind of fitting given the circumstances. Like he's in prison, he's miserable, like everything's just kind of awful in there and bleak and dour. Like there's no reason to like bring up that persona again as Joker and those kind of contexts. Plus he's medicated again, so it's that kind of Joker side is more suppressed again. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean they take liberties with the Harley Quinn character where they change her quite a bit, which that's not an issue that I have. I mean, just quickly on that note, I mean the first Joker does not suffer because he was not thrown into a vat of chemicals or anything like that. So yes, you can make like these changes to Harley Quinn. That's fine. And you mentioned this earlier, like this TV movie, it's very clearly a response to people that saw Joker, where it's like it is not subtle. Like, there's people that love it or hate it, but like Harley Quinn just lies to Joker in this, and it's like. But there's a point where someone mentioned said the Joker movie was terrible. Like the Zazie Beetz character, like his neighbor that he was imagining being in a relationship with in the first one, she comes back for a scene, which was kind of funny because she's like a really notable actress. It was funny, like she was just in one scene in this movie, but she says that terrible Joker movie, and Arthur looks back at Lee really worried, and Lee shakes her head like, no, it's good. And then Arthur's really happy. Like I laughed a lot at that. Like that was really funny. There were two things that really made me laugh. One was that, and the other was when he started signing that guard's book on the Robert De Niro character, and he crossed out, put on a happy face or whatever he was writing, and he said, I hope you get cancer with a big smiley face.
And I'm glad you mentioned like the Harley being different, because it's almost like a twist of like the traditional Joker and Harley relationship, like from the animated series, where it's like in that it was like Harley was literally just a means for an escape for Joker in that show. That relationship like kind of meant almost nothing to Joker. He just kind of kept manipulating her again and again. And this is almost like a twist of that, where this time it's Harley manipulating Arthur, And that kind of, and I'm okay with that because like this is a franchise built on creative liberties. Like I don't care about like comic
Yeah.
accuracy that much. And
If I could go the rest of my life without hearing someone say comic accurate, my life would be all the better for it.
yeah, exactly. And like I think, there are cases where like something like that could bother me, like, 2016 Suicide Squad, where I mean, number one, it's sure, yeah, it's not comic accurate, but number two, it's like I didn't buy their relationship enough in that movie to believe that Joker would put himself in harm's way to
Mhm.
go rescue Harley for something like that. But
Yeah.
like this, I can get because this is a pretty pathetic Joker or Arthur, just like person in general, and I could easily buy that Harley would manipulate this person to get the kind of power and respect that he got at the end of the first movie.
Sure. And I will say, like, Joker and Harley, like, the moments where they do act like the characters that they are, I think
Mhm.
they're great. Those are great moments. Like the one musical sequence where it's like the talk show where they're acting like Joker and Harley there. Like that was fun. And
Yeah,
there's even a point where when Joker is representing himself, he's talking like he's like a Southern lawyer. And I
yeah.
thought that was great. It's like he saw Anatomy of a Murder, so he's doing like a Jimmy Stewart kind of voice. It's funny.
Mhm.
And uh, I know there's been lots of talk about the first Joker movie, where if you're the general discourse of that was if you like Joker, you're a bad person,
Right.
is basically what it boiled down to. Um, and they doubled down on this one, in my opinion. It's like it just kind of makes you not want to watch the 2019 Joker anymore because this movie makes such fun of it. Like I know not everyone loved that Joker movie, but I mean, you look at its average rating on Letterboxd and IMDb and all those places, and it's high. Like it was Oscar nominated and everything. Like it's a relatively well-liked movie, but the people that disliked it, it was a very loud voice. And I feel
Yeah.
like Todd Phillips maybe, I don't want to accuse anyone of anything, but like maybe took that a little personally, but then he pumped that into this, which then insults both movies. So yeah, it's a bit weird. And
I get
again,
what you mean, yeah.
mm,
And
like
I think like I do agree. I do get the vibe that like Todd Phillips is using this movie mainly as just a response. I think both to criticism and praise of the movie because I feel
mm,
like people who really loved it, not everyone, but a lot of them, again, they were just kind of focusing this on a Joker origin movie when it's a lot more than that. So, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like you want to make a sequel to Joker, like okay, what's another really important Joker element that we can adapt? Well, Harley Quinn is a really important piece. Like the fact that Joker says in court that the Joker isn't real, and this really disappoints Harley, and she leaves the court. Joker then finds Harley on the stairs from the first one, and she's like, "You said Joker wasn't real, and that hurts." And then she just leaves, and then she's out of the movie. Okay. Um, so, like I mentioned earlier, I don't buy the split personality thing. I
Mhm.
think, like I said, it to me the point of the first one is that it's a person that just finally cracked, and like he's got all these fantasies in his head. But then it begs the question, like, were any Harley scenes a fantasy in this movie? Like, was the Joker sex scene a fantasy? Uh, and there's just there's some things like I just don't need to see in my life. I didn't need to see Joker sex. There's two things I did not want to see in this movie. One was that, and then the other was the guards assaulting him later. It's like, look, I'm not saying like I bought my ticket for an R-rated movie. I knew what I was getting into, but there's a difference between doing something for a purpose and doing something just for shock value.
See,
And
I felt like that kind of had a little bit of purpose to it. Because again, it's like that's kind of the struggle of Joker because it's he gets assaulted because like he makes fun of the guards live in the courtroom and like again like the intro sets it up. It's not just Arthur that has like this shadow or darker half. It's everyone. Like Lee has it. These guards have it. They they're smiling and happy like in the limelight, but there's really dark undertones from them, especially in that sequence. And
yeah,
I felt like if you cut that out, it would kind of like make Arthur's decision to kind of like leave behind the Joker a little bit underwhelming, because you have that sequence and his friend getting murdered, and
Yeah.
then you have Gary's testimony, which kind of questions like, why is Arthur like really doing this at this point? So um, I get what you mean, and it is pretty extreme, but like I do think it actually does have a purpose in the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I thought it was implying that something else was about to happen because they start ripping off his clothes, but then we see, like, I don't think anything actually happened because he gets dragged back to his cell with his underwear still on,
Hmm.
but also, like, his shirt from the court. And then, like you said, then they kill this one guy that was kind of sympathetic towards Joker. And you just hear, like, voices are like, oh my God, man, he's dead or something. And it's, like, that is what I guess inspires Arthur to no longer be the Joker, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, well,
Well, I mean, like, what good is it doing? Like, those were the people like that kind of championed Arthur as Joker, and because Arthur embraced that Joker persona again, it's like it's getting a lot of people killed and bringing out everyone's ugly side. It's just not worth it at that point. Like, I was fine with it.
sure. Well, we might as well talk about the very ending because this all
Okay.
leads to this very odd moment where Joker is taken back to prison. He was found guilty, but he's in prison and Brendan Gleeson says, you got a visitor or something. Like he's marching along in the hallway and there's this one other criminal who we just randomly see sometimes throughout the movie. Like he's
Mhm.
got a creepy look. Like he's trying to say something to Joker and then he just starts stabbing him repeatedly a lot. So he kills him. Then he starts carving a smile on his face in the background. And I guess it implies that the Joker legacy, for lack of a better term, just continues after Arthur. Like the Joker can be anybody. Like I'm
Yeah.
actually totally fine with that as a concept. But
Yeah, me too.
it was an odd ending to this movie. And because he's also carving a scar, like scarring up a smile into his face, which implies a very specific Joker. And I've seen this idea floating around. Like, is this meant to be a prequel to The Dark Knight?
I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a second.
And it's just kind of a weird thing to think about because like okay, we're teasing like arguably the most famous, like I mean now most famous incarnation of the character, but just also a very weird ending to this movie because then we go back to the fantasy where he's singing to Harley about their child and it's like, oh, okay, does their child grow up to be a Joker? Like, because we're still dealing with a Bruce Wayne who's a little kid. So, like, all these characters are meant to be like, oh, they become that character in the future, which then makes it extra confusing when we've now had a Harvey Dent who was kind of turned into Two-Face in this movie as well.
Sure.
He's scarred up on that side of his face. He's all like sitting there on the ground. So I was like, oh, okay, they turned Harvey into Two-Face. Like I thought he was meant to be young for a reason, but he's already Two-Face before Batman.
See, that's what I mean. It's like I don't think this is like meant to connect to those movies. I think this is just kind of what you said earlier is that this just kind of sets up like this Joker legacy lives on, not necessarily in that other franchise, because there's a lot of different things that just don't line up. Like
Right.
the Waynes getting murdered, like that's completely different in Batman Begins, and just kind of like all of that stuff. And so I think like, and you said it earlier, is like the concept of it's pretty good because, like I said earlier, Arthur's not special. Like anyone could have been on that subway train in the first movie. Like Arthur is just the guy that happened to get pushed too far. And so like there was never like I never got this vibe that like Arthur had to be Joker. Like when I went to rewatch the first movie after watching this, is like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. He's not doing this for any kind of, power gain. Like he happens to get that mass audience of people who like idolize him. But it didn't have to be Arthur that picked up this like mantle basically. And some people just want to watch the world burn, I guess. But yeah. But yeah, I'm okay with the ending. It is pretty abrupt and just kind of weird, but like the context of the scene, like I think it kind of works for like where Arthur is at that point.
Sure. And Harvey, the inclusion of him as a character, like it makes a lot of sense, but he's like, I know he's an actor that's been in tons of stuff, but he seemed too young to be the DA. of a
I kind of
major
got that
city
vibe
like that.
too. Yeah.
Which, by the way, like in this, okay, if you want to talk about dorky comic book fan things, they claim that it's the state of New York against Arthur Fleck. So yeah, so Gotham City is in the state of New York, and apparently like he's the assistant DA or something like that. But I guess if we're just replacing New York with Gotham, that's fine. But then it shouldn't be the state of New York. It should be the state of Gotham. Gotham, Gotham. It's like New York, New York. That's totally normal. Gotham City, Gotham. It's fine. But yeah, I don't know. That was a weird thing to me. It's a fantasy place. You don't have to put it in a real state.
They should have done like a Simpsons reference where they mention like the neighboring states of Gotham, and it's like Colorado and Maine and all that.
Anything else to talk about with this weird movie, Chris?
I don't know if I have that much else to say. Unless you got something to bring up.
I mean, Todd Phillips has basically divorced himself from DC at this point, where he's kind of done. This was not like attached to DC or James Gunn. Like this is purely a Warner Brothers picture directed by Todd Phillips.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, at the same time, James Gunn was calling The Flash a really good movie once upon a time. So I don't know. I can't really say lucky for you, Todd Phillips. You're free from this because I don't know. I also thought this was I mean this was better than The Flash. I'll give it that much. I was more entertained by this than I think I was The Flash. I certainly liked the performances more in this than I liked them in The Flash. I don't know. Weird movie. I do really appreciate the attempt at trying to be something totally different, but it was an odd way to go about it. So there we go.
Anyways, yeah, I really liked it, but I do 100%. It is weird. And I don't know. I just kind of like, I think like the choices it's making in this movie, I think are just more interesting than the first one, or at least like the first half of the first movie.
Sure.
So that's kind of like where a lot of my praise is coming with this. But I do recommend everyone give it a rewatch. Give it another shot. But if I'm the sole defender of this movie, that's okay. I'm fine with that.
Nice. And I would mildly recommend this movie. But yeah.
I mean, like, I think the things about this that really also work in the first one, just like the cinematography is gorgeous in this movie, and especially in those musical sequences. But like, yeah, it's a beautiful movie. It's really well acted. The score is good. It's all those things that like really worked in the first movie. They also work here. So,
Chris, where can people find you online?
You can find me over on Letterboxd and Instagram.
Same with me, and you can also find my video editing work over on the Amazing Spider Talks YouTube channel, so check it out. And we'll see you all very shortly next time. I think next time we're going back to Star Wars. We're going to talk The Acolyte, finally. We're breaking our vows on our vow of silence on Star Wars. We're going back to it. So look forward to that. Take care, everyone. Bye.